You're watching Phantom Astronaut's Night Terrors, where the shadows of history come alive, and every whispered story finds its voice. Tonight, we step into the haunted life of one of America's greatest literary minds, Edgar Allan Poe. His life was filled with sorrow, mystery, and tragedy, a story that feels as if it were plucked from one of his own tales of the macabre. If you're a fan of dark tales and mysterious histories, and be sure to like, share, and subscribe to help our channel grow. Check the links in the description for more ways to support us. Now, light a candle, settle in, and let's delve into the eerie life of Edgar Allan Poe. Baltimore, 1849. The city streets were slick with rain, the cobblestones glistening in the pale light of a waxing moon. Somewhere in the distance, a clock struck midnight, its chimes echoing through the cold October air. A man stumbled into the lamplight, his clothes tattered, his face pale and drawn. It was Edgar Allan Poe, or what was left of him. By the time they found him, he was barely recognizable. His lips moved, forming words no one could understand, his eyes wide with terror, as if he'd seen something no mortal was meant to witness. They carried him to Washington College Hospital, where he lingered for 4 long days, slipping in and out of consciousness. On the morning of October 7th, he died, whispering his final cryptic words, "Lord, help my poor soul." To this day, no one knows exactly how Poe died. Some say it was alcoholism, others tuberculosis or rabies. But there are darker theories, whispers of madness, curses, and otherworldly forces. To understand the death of Edgar Allan Poe, one must first understand his life, a life steeped in loss, despair, and the shadow of something not entirely human. Poe's life was marked by tragedy from the very beginning. Born in 1809 to traveling actors, he lost his parents before he was 3 years old. His mother, Elizabeth, died of tuberculosis, her thin frame racked with bloody coughs that echoed through their tiny boarding house. His father, David, had disappeared months earlier, swallowed by his own vices. Poe was taken in by John and Frances Allen, wealthy merchants in Richmond, Virginia. But his new home was cold, and the relationship between Poe and his foster father was strained at best. John Allen was a stern man who valued discipline and detested Poe's wild imagination. Frances, kind but frail, became the only source of warmth in Poe's life. But even she couldn't shield him from the darkness that seemed to follow him like a shadow. By the time Poe was a young man, he had developed a taste for the macabre. He spent hours poring over Gothic literature, his mind alight with tales of death and madness. But the world around him offered no solace. Frances died when Poe was 20, another victim of the relentless scourge of tuberculosis. Her death left him adrift, a young man with no anchor, no purpose, only the gaping void of his own mind. Poe's literary career was as turbulent as his life. His stories were dark, filled with unreliable narrators, decaying mansions, and the specter of death. Critics dismissed him as a lunatic, his works too grim for a public that craved hope and heroism. But Poe didn't care. He wrote as if the words were clawing their way out of him, desperate to escape the confines of his mind. He found brief happiness in his marriage to Virginia Clem, his 13-year-old cousin. To modern eyes, the marriage is unsettling. But to Poe, Virginia was everything: a muse, a partner, a beacon of light in an otherwise bleak existence. But their happiness was short-lived. In 1842, Virginia began to show signs of tuberculosis. The same disease that had claimed his mother and foster mother now came for his wife. Poe wrote feverishly during this time, producing some of his most famous works: The Telltale Heart, The Raven, and Annabel Lee. But his writing wasn't enough to keep the darkness at bay. He drank heavily, his nights filled with hallucinations and nightmares. Friends spoke of his erratic behavior, his tendency to stare into the distance as if seeing something no one else could. Poe's obsession with the supernatural wasn't just a literary device. It was a reflection of his own fears. He believed in the thin veil between life and death, in the idea that the dead could reach out to the living. His stories weren't mere fiction. They were warnings, glimpses into the abyss that threatened to consume him. Some scholars suggest that Poe's mental instability was the result of a genetic predisposition to depression, exacerbated by the traumas of his life. Others point to his erratic behavior as evidence of addiction, his drinking a means of escaping the relentless pain. But there are those who whisper of something darker. Poe's fascination with death, his ability to capture the macabre with such precision, led some to believe that he had been touched by something otherworldly. Was it madness, or had he glimpsed a truth too terrible to comprehend? In his final days, Poe was said to have been found wearing clothes that weren't his own, speaking in voices that didn't sound like his. Had he been possessed? Or had he crossed some unseen boundary, his mind unable to return? The circumstances of Poe's death remain one of literature's greatest mysteries. On October 3, 1849, he was found delirious in a Baltimore gutter, wearing clothes that didn't fit and muttering incoherently. He was taken to the hospital, where he spent his last days in agony. He called out for someone named Reynolds, though no one knows who he meant. His death certificate was lost, his medical records destroyed. All that remains are the whispers of those who were there. Some claimed he raved about shadows creeping along the walls, their voices like whispers in his ears. Others said he clutched at his throat, gasping as if something unseen were choking the life out of him. Theories abound. Some say he was a victim of cooping, a common practice in which men were kidnapped, forced to drink, and used to cast multiple votes in elections. Others believe he succumbed to rabies or a brain tumor. But then there are the darker stories, the ones that suggest Poe's own creations turned against him, that the monsters he wrote of found him in the end. Poe's grave in Baltimore is a place of pilgrimage for those who revere his work. But even in death, he remains an enigma. Visitors claim to feel a chill in the air, a presence that lingers just beyond sight. Some report hearing the faint sound of a quill scratching against parchment, as if Poe is still writing, his stories not yet finished. The mystery of Poe's life and death continues to haunt us. His words a window into the fragile, terrifying human condition. He wrote of the shadowy corners of the mind, the places we dare not go, and, in doing so, he gave voice to the fears that we all carry. And thank you for joining me on this journey into the dark and tragic life of Edgar Allan Poe. If tonight's episode of Phantom Astronaut's Night Terrors gave you chills, remember to like, share, and subscribe to help the channel grow. Don't forget to check the links in the description for more ways to support us. This has been Phantom Astronaut's Nocturnal Tales.